Let's meet the panelists tonight. Right next to me is Kokio Cheng. She is a lecturer at the USIU Africa, lecturer of journalism and media studies, and has also contributed to Press Pass several times. Next to her is Eric Odwor, the Secretary General at the Kenya Union of Journalists, as well as a sub-editor here at the Nation Media Group. And next to him is Senior Hassan Kulundu, who is a media consultant, now has been a journalist, a practicing journalist in the newsrooms around the country, and even an editor, so has a lot to lend to this conversation tonight. We'll start with what has led across the board today and perhaps will dominate the headlines tomorrow in your favorite daily, and that is on the attempt on the deputy president, who may have kicked off a new storm after he alleged a plot to assassinate him. 4 cabinet secretaries, a number of principal secretaries and chief administrative secretaries from the Mount Kenya region said to be at the center of this scheme today answered summons to appear at the DCI to respond to these claims. The senior government officials, however, rubbished the allegations and accused the deputy president of an attempt to embarrass them. They say they will take appropriate action once investigations into the alleged plot are complete. NTV's Seth Olale was at the DCI headquarters and filed this report.
Cabinet Secretary for Trade Peter Munya, his ICT counterpart Joe Musheru, CS for Health Cecily Kariuki, and her transport counterpart James Macharia, flanked by other senior government officials, mostly drawn from the Mount Kenya region, were questioned about an alleged plot to assassinate Deputy President William Ruto.
But they have confirmed to us that the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya made a call and complained.
It is alleged that the senior government officials, mostly drawn from Mount Kenya and the Central Kenya region, held a meeting on 14th May at Lamada Hotel. Top on the agenda, it is alleged, was to put together the details of the Deputy President's assassination.
There is freedom of association and the freedom of expression. People are allowed to meet as long as they are not meeting to plan any criminal activities.
The Deputy President allegedly told the DCI that the plot was part of a wider scheme to lock him out of the 2022 Kenyatta succession.
I think it's irresponsible, unfair, and it intended to portray us in a very bad light so that we look like criminals who meet to plot criminal activities against him. And it's also intended to injure our reputation.
The leaders say the meetings addressed concerns about development in the region, but the allegations seem to relate to an unverified letter dated the 30th May 2019 and circulated on social media, purporting to have been written by a cabinet secretary whose name was redacted. The letter, titled Matters of Grave Concern, contains details of a meeting held on a Tuesday this year, supposedly attended by CSS Peter Munya, Cecily Kariuki, James Macharia and Joseph Musheru, with the agenda listed as to show up support for the president in Mount Kenya, a proposed referendum, and going on an offensive against the DP. Interestingly, the CSS named in letter, whose authenticity has not yet been verified, are the very ones summoned by the DCI. The said meeting was held on the 14th of May, a Tuesday, and a date that also appears on the letter. The CSS, however, did not record any statements since the Deputy President has not filed a formal complaint. Investigations over the assassination plot are being undertaken by the Serious Crimes Unit as well as the Cyber Crimes Unit under the Directorate of Criminal Investigations. Detectives will question all persons of interest before submitting a detailed report to the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti. Seth Olale, NTV at the DCI headquarters, Kiambu Road.
It was important that we start with that story just to give context. It's something that broke today and was all over the other media houses. Just in case you weren't watching NTV and watching one of the others, you most probably saw a story that followed that same structure. It started with this particular letter with allegations that, you know, there was a meeting by these said cabinet secretaries who gave their responses. And I mean, it's very questionable in terms of who the source of this letter was, where it came from, and what have you. Now, just start with the panel just to find out their feelings, initial first of all. And I'll start with you, Koki. Would you have given this as much attention as it's been given today? It's the leading story in all media houses.
Not really based on the letter, because we are in the era of knowing what fake news is all about.
Right.
And if you can't verify from where the letter is coming from, then I don't think it's a story. But then again, we're in the era of mediatization where the sources will play their game, create a narrative, and media will follow because they know how to entice media to pay attention to their stories.
Right.
On the allegation of threat to life, of course, that's a story. That's
Yes.
a big story. It has prominence.
No less to
Yeah.
the DP.
Exactly. So I think that would be an interesting way. But I think due process is what the media would need to question. What is the due process if your life is threatened? Don't you file a report at the police station, have an OB number, go through the process? Instead of just talking about allegations, then it's not really something that is verifiable in that manner.
And I remember when I shared this with Erica, you said the first thing, at least questionable to you, is that there is no formal complaint to the target, the supposed target.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we've seen from the statement that was made by the cabinet secretaries when they appeared at the DCI offices here in Nairobi. Because they said that so far there has been no formal complaint that has been filed. It was just a phone call. So definitely that brings a lot of questions that can people be summoned on the basis of a phone call that has been made by a complainant. So we are hoping that probably to move this story forward tomorrow, we would be asking a lot of questions from DCI whether they have asked Deputy President William Ruto to go and file a formal complaint so that they're able to investigate this matter. Remember, in this country we've had a lot of stories of political assassination. So this is a story that cannot be treated lightly by the media. And
Yes.
we hope that now there are two offices here that actually can help this story move forward. That is the office of the Deputy President, who supposedly made a phone call. We are hoping that probably when he was making a phone call, he was very far away. He could not probably drive to the nearest police station to record a statement. He will be able to do that. And we are also hoping that the DCI will be able to tell us that finally we've been able to get hold of Deputy President to give us the details of the plot to assassinate him, because this is not a story that can be treated lightly. It's a story that cannot just end tomorrow by being on the headline.
Yes.
But at least we hope to know details of this story. Supposedly, I suppose there was assassination attempts, or there were discussions around that issue. Then again, we are also hoping that the media will be able to give us more details other than just not relying on the spin from the politician. Because right now, if you see what is going on there, is like we've got two camps now. So there's a camp that is being accused of plotting to block Deputy President William Ruto from ascending to power come 2022. Then we have got another group that actually is pushing for him to ascend to power when we go for elections in 2022. So this is a very sensitive issue that we hope will not just be followed based on the spins that we are seeing from political parties.
Yes, and to Bwana Kulundu, with the legal background that you have, at least what you've looked into, in terms of due process, has been mentioned by Koki here, in terms of an issue being reported and it being confirmed by one report here, this is Citizen actually, their online version, and it leads as yes, DP Ruto called over alleged assassination plot, says DCI Kinoti. Does this in any way count as a formal complaint?
In criminal law, that's not a formal complaint. Ideally, the complainant has to make a formal written statement, because a complaint includes being written,
yes,
and the statement entered into what we call an occurrence book. So without that, legally speaking, it's not a formal complaint as such. Nonetheless, let's go back to journalism. Koki started by saying that if you are the news manager, you will first of all try to verify the authenticity of that letter before you move with the story. Now, I must say that journalists are not expected to verify things with issues with the mathematical precision. At least that precision is built for lawyers and prosecutors in court.
But isn't precision in the line of facts?
Yeah, even facts, even however scant it is, journalists have got that leeway to at least pick wherever it is. It's an allegation. In fact, that's why I think the people who reported it said alleged.
Yes.
So it's an allegation. So I would go with that story. First of all, the reason why I'll go with that story and even give it prominence as a news manager is because of the history of this country with regard to what my colleague Erica talked about, about the assassination or threat to the lives of prominent people in this country. In 1975, in fact, the media, national media group, in fact, really got embarrassed with the J.M. Kariuki story. While J.M. Kariuki's body was rotting and he was being eaten by hyenas in Ngong Forest, Nation was reporting that he was on a trip to Zambia. Okay? So in order to avoid that kind of embarrassment, you must pay attention to it. Secondly, we recently had the situation of, if you remember, 1990, Robert Oko's murder.
Yes.
When he disappeared, it was announced on radio that wherever he is, if you can hear this announcement, let him report the nearest police station. A whole cabinet minister, foreign affairs, saying that wherever he is, nobody could tell you where he was. Only for him to turn up, his body to turn up at Gotalila. And up this moment, we have not solved that killing. So, because of that, when this kind of issue comes in, and I'm a news manager who has got a good history of what has happened in this country, I'll go that story, I'll pay attention to it, irrespective of how scanty or how doubtful the letter is.
Yeah. And there's something else, because and he's mentioned. Yeah, Eric, go
and
ahead.
I wanted to add to that. If you look at the political assassinations that Kulundu has talked about, all of them are actually, and even you add of Robert Ouk or of Tom Mboya, all of them were surrounded, because historians have come up to say that all of them actually were surrounded with the succession politics.
Yes.
See? So if you are talking about succession politics, these assassinations are also tied to succession politics. And we're also talking about succession politics when we are mentioning William Ruto here. So these are very serious and very sensitive issues.
Yes.
I think I mentioned that it's about, paying attention to the allegation, not that I would believe the letter per se.
Okay.
I didn't say that you shouldn't pay attention to it, please. That's not what I said. What I meant was, in terms of course, there's a press conference. Somebody's telling you something that you need to pay attention to, yes. But based on the letter that was presented there, I wouldn't probably think about it.
And while we are at it, and we know there's also politics at play in this story, not ignoring it, giving it the weight that it deserves, these are sentiments that are carried by many people, and it's something that has been in the public forum at play. Mutua Lloyd says, we need to be cautious about this Ruto assassination saga. We're being distracted from a huge scandal. A huge scandal is looming. Whilst this can't be proven, there is the instances where a spin or story is put out there and it throws us in a whirl, where we get lost in that while something is happening in the background. Would you also, with that in mind, with the historical context in mind, be very careful with this particular story?
Certainly, I'll be very careful. First of all, I'll break the story, let it go the way things are. Then from there, we start to analyze the issues.
Yes.
And the skepticism that all journalists are trained in, the way Koki says, that's when it sets in later. So later on, this is what I'll do, I'll analyze the letter. First and foremost, even look at the context and ask myself, who is so stupid in this 21st century to plot an assassination under those circumstances? All right? That's the first thing. Then if you look at the letter, even the way it's authored, the way it's written, the content, and what I can call the kind of its diction. It's not a letter you can say it was authored by a cabinet secretary addressing the chief executive of this country. So that's from there. That's when now we'll start doing what, poking holes in the authenticity of that letter as journalists. But for purpose of breaking the story, we'll go with it the way it is, cautiously, of course, but exercising the skepticism that every journalist is trained to exercise during such issues.
But Mark, well, one thing I must also add to this is that whenever these documents are actually released, or somebody is trying to sneak this document outside an office where it was authored, journalists always know because this letter does not just drop on the street.
Yes.
These people who are releasing this information, actually they always do that in consultation with journalists. They tell that, oh, you just wait, there is something we are going to release, you just wait for it. So by the time this document is being released, actually journalists actually already know where this data is coming from, only that sometimes, given the ethics and legal implications, sometimes journalists don't actually reveal where who was the author of these letters. But one thing I know is that when these letters are released, journalists actually are aware, because journalists are actually always on high alert.
Yes.
And these people also work with the journalists when they want to reveal some kind
As
of
a sub-editor, you would want to know, at least, they don't reveal the source,
Yeah.
but a journalist will come to you and say, I have something. And you would ask, who is the source? So by the time we're going with a story, and perhaps we'll see it on Daily Nation tomorrow, or any other, the dailies, the Standard, Nairobi News, or the Star, beg your pardon, then you'd be able to verify that. There's
Exactly.
some checks.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying that when this story actually is being carried, that means that a proper process actually has been followed. And as an editor or a sub-editor, when the story is brought before me and I want to know the authenticity of the story and the document, journalists actually do reveal to their editors, so that even if the story that is published or aired does not have those details, but actually the editor who approved the story has all those details, who authored it, how was it released, so that in the event that there is a need for this story to be defended elsewhere, I think the editor who authorized this story actually has all the details.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
but I mean, we are in the era of fake news, and we know that. And we know that, like I said, sources can really manufacture stories that we can, fall prey to. So I think what the editor was saying here is that, yes, the skepticism must be there, and it must be more, more obvious, because we are not in the era of verifying who the letter is from. Look at the language, like he says, the diction. Is this the way government style letters are written? Is this something that will just go out there, just like that for the sake of it? Maybe think back, when did this story begin? For me, this story began last week.
Yes.
I mean, just from the conversations you could see online.
Right.
So again, yes, we understand it's a grievous issue. It must be addressed. We must report it. But then again, when we go back to the verification and factification aspect of it, then we become a bit more diligent.
Would it be embarrassing? We wake up tomorrow, we find out this letter was nothing but a fake, and just see how easy it is to get the attention of the media and throw them in a spin.
Nothing embarrassing. First and foremost, we have had, we have just seen the DCI, a statement
Yes.
from an authentic person. Secondly, we have seen senior cabinet of ministers addressing us.
Yes.
Through using our own platforms. So there will be nothing embarrassing about that. The story was about that incident where they reported DCI.
Exactly.
That's the story for today.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the letter now, that's something will come later. Now that we shall pursue it later, because I don't think anybody who has reported about this story today has said with certainty that this is true. In fact, I want to believe the word allegation covers all those areas used in the reportage. But just to go back to what you said, why journalists will believe that maybe somebody wants to put the spanner into the works by first of all trying to look at the authenticity of that letter. You will find, first of all, look at the caption, what we call what you call the track, what you call the track as put on it. Instead of, I would expect such a letter to have the track called confidential, not urgent.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
just
So,
government.
Yeah, so
language.
with experience in journalism and people who have dealt with the government documents as part of our as journalists, we'll begin now poking holes. I would expect that one to have been tracked as a confidential and not urgent.
Yeah.
Right. And there's something about the urgency, and we're in an age, as much as we're in the age of fake news, there's also the question of urgency, and I mentioned it to you, Eric, where I was actually in the line of accusations and criticism that we were not that quick to break this particular story. Is that a concern for you as a sub-editor? What do we need to put in check? Because we've had a lot of legal action taken against us, and as you see the allegations and accusations against these CSs, they could rake in a lot. And it kind of slows us down in reporting such.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I was saying, that if you look at the kind of reporters and editors we have, these are the people who have got the capacity to handle some of these things, so that by the time this story is actually getting to the newsroom, it means that the process of verification and facts checking actually begin from the source of the story.
And you're saying by the time we got it, and we had this, I mean, most of the newsrooms had this early in the morning or even before. We've been following
exactly this. So that I'm saying that once you get it, the facts checking actually starts from the beginning. So by the time it goes to the editor, that's where now the editor will sometimes stop the story, say that, okay, fine, we have this story, we have everything. So what we do, let us do due diligence before we release the story. So that it means that by the time the story, all this document actually go into the hands of journalists, the process of verification began from there.
Yes.
But up to the time that our story is written. So I believe that by the time all these things were happening, the story was ready. What was going on was just verification and also checking with the legal team, so that when the story is actually released, it does not have a lot of it doesn't cause a lot of problems. But I know that the story is usually ready. So what remains is just verification and authentication to authenticate the document, and then therefore the story is released.
All right. And what's more heavier for you, that we break it or we verify it? What for you will outlast the other?
I think if it's a grievous matter like this, there's that, you know, between a hard rock and a hard place, because you're like, we need to break it, but then again we need to verify, and at the end of the day there are so many challenges in verification. But then journalism is about gatekeeping, and gatekeeping is about making sure you have the facts and you verify them.
Right.
So I think when you want to think about telling a story and making sure that it's real, it's the truth, your side of the truth, his side of the truth. There are those processes we understand through our news values and you know, code of conduct that will guide us on how well or how we work on a story so that it gives a reflection of reality.
But you see, Mark, the dilemma that we had as journalists when this story actually broke was that at that time, even up to now, it's the question that we're still asking: what was the formal complaint? Was there a formal complaint with the DCI, which up to now we still don't have? And I think that's the question that we are still grappling from the beginning. So I don't believe that there was wrong decisions that were made by media houses, because even up to now, we still do not have that formal complaint being filed with the DCI. And that was the question that actually people started asking from the morning. Up to now, that question has not been answered. But actually, we got a lease of life when we saw these cabinet secretaries appearing at DCI to record statements. So actually, it now allowed journalists actually to get somewhere or something that they can anchor the story on as they pursue the remaining facts that have not been checked.
Okay. Yes. Real quick.
Mark, as we pursue this issue, we must remember. Let's go back to the news we had yesterday.
Yes.
As we speak, there's a former MCA from West Pokot whose body was found killed, dumped somewhere, mutilated, and what looks like an assassination or an elimination. Then we must not forget that in that particular report, the victim was an assistant to Honorable Senator Murkomen. And Mr. Murkomen appeared on TV saying that if DCI or whoever has the concerned authorities will not have said something concerning that in 24 hours, he will spill the beans, so to speak. So it's hardly 24 hours before that we are hearing this. Now,
even last week, I think there was a CEC who was assassinated in Homa Bay.
Likewise, in Homa Bay. Yes. Now, these are some of the issues that, because I remember you asked a question: is that somebody want to put a spin? Is why would want somebody to gain prominence in the media? So I think the long-lasting issue after the waters, the storms have cooled down, the story will be this. If at all these particular letters are forgery, the question will be this: who actually brought it in the media, and what intentions did they have? That will be the issue now.
Okay. And we'll lay this story to rest when we come back from the break. But someone here says, Alvin Mabea, you say a threat to the life of a leader does not need to be reported for it to be investigated. Better safe than sorry. Basically saying that this is not something that we would or should ignore. And people are saying where there's smoke, there is fire. So we're not being alarmist, not being sensationalist, but we're also looking at the context that govern or that guide our decisions as journalists and different newsrooms in the country. Stay with